Welcome to this week's episode of Running Tales. My guest today ran the virtual London Marathon on Sunday, like many thousand runners, walkers and wheelchair racers. However, when you see a post on her Facebook page on the 15th of September saying, "Sod the cancer, the dream team are running the virtual London Marathon," and on top of that find out they are visually impaired, then yes, we had to have on Running Tales. Thank you, Lizzie Tovey, for sharing with us, and please begin by telling us your running tale. Have you always been a runner?
No, I started running back in 2018, so it's only been a couple of years since I've been running. I started losing my sight in my early 30s, and before then I could honestly say I was a bit of a couch potato, if I'm honest with you. And during my 30s I worked very hard. I was working very long hours, and then in 2014 I started to lose my sight. I had a real complication with the visual impairment that I've got. So up until then, I'd still had relatively good central vision. But in 2014, there were some complications. I had to have some surgeries on my eyes, and I lost most of the sight in my right eye. So if you can imagine looking through bubble wrap, that's what I see out of my right eye. And in my left eye, I've only got really just a very small amount of central vision, so I can literally only see like a hand's length in front of me very clearly, and only out of the central part of my eye. So I started to suffer then in 2014 with real mental health issues. I started to get depressed. I'd lost my confidence. I had to learn to use a long cane because I can't see in the dark at all. And I'm fiercely independent, and it did feel like all that was being ripped away from me. So I decided I needed to do something to get out of that rut. And I decided I wanted to do something that I could just do in the fresh air and get out in the fresh air. And so I started to look for somebody to help me run. And at that point, I didn't know anything about guide running or that guide runners even existed. And it took me about a year to find a guide runner. But luckily, sort of 2018 I started my journey, so I'd started looking sort of 2017 time, and it took me a year and the help of a local charity to find a guide runner called Corin Elliott, and he really started me on my running journey. We did a modified version of Couch to 5K. I was his first visually impaired runner, although he's a registered guide. I was his first visually impaired runner, and we were both petrified. But it was the best. It was the best thing I ever did. And we did a modified version of Couch to 5K, and I graduated that in the April. And pretty soon afterwards, I just really decided that I absolutely loved running. I love running with Corin. I love running with all the guide runners that I run with. But we struck up a really good friendship, and my husband and I became really close friends with him and his wife during that journey. And we decided we wanted to do something to expand the knowledge of people in our local community of visually impaired running, because I really did struggle to find a guide runner.
So at the time, was there other runners as well that you could talk to that were visually impaired, or was there literally just you on your own?
Just me on my own. I didn't know anybody in the visually impaired running community. I do know now. I know a lot of people in the visually impaired running community, but back then neither Corin nor I really did know anybody in the visually impaired running community. And we started running. We did park run a lot back in those days, and obviously people saw us. People started to ask questions, and then our local park run decided they wanted to get more people involved, to get more guide runners. And so there's quite a network of guide runners now in our local area, which is absolutely superb. And so that's how it all started, really.
Is it Arrow Valley? Where's that?
That's right. It's Arrow Valley in Redditch. So that's our home park run, and I really do miss park run, actually, as I'm sure many people do because of lockdown.
Yes.
But I think there's probably about 18 or 19 guide runners now in our local area, which there never would have been before. And I've run with quite a few of them. I have quite a network of guide runners now. But when we started off doing parkrun, Corinne and I decided we wanted to also raise a bit of money for charity if we could. So we decided to enter the 2019 London Marathon, which we did in the aid of guide dogs last year. And we did the London Marathon. It's before I knew I was poorly. And we did the London Marathon last year. We raised enough money to sponsor a guide dog for somebody, which is amazing. And it was during that journey that we met Simon Elliott, who I think you've interviewed before.
Yes, on a previous episode, telling us
Yeah.
about guide running.
Yeah. So we Simon and I have run together as well. We've also done some virtual running during lockdown where we've been on WhatsApp chatting to each other. And so I met Simon at the Rugby Half Marathon in 2018, and he was telling me all about his running journey. And he's really introduced me to more visually impaired runners and a bit of a network of visually impaired runners, both Corinne and myself. So yes, Corinne and I did the 2019 London Marathon, and it was towards the back end of last year where I started to feel quite poorly. So during running, it's quite weird when I'm running, because I can see, generally if I'm stood still, I can see somebody stood in front of me. But when I'm running, I can't really see very much at all. It's like my eyes can't keep up with me running. And last year I was suffering terribly with motion sickness when I was running. It was an awful feeling, but I run through it. And my eye consultant said it was because my brain couldn't catch up. But yeah. I've since found out that actually it was tumours. I was diagnosed this February with a really aggressive form of breast cancer. And the prognosis isn't great. It is a terminal prognosis. It's a really horrible thing to be going through. But I found out that I'd got lots of tumours pressing on nerves in my neck and around my throat and that. And that's what was causing the motion sickness, because since I've had chemotherapy, a lot of that motion sickness feeling is gone. It's because the tumours have reduced. So, yeah.
Well, that's good news that the tumours are reducing.
Oh, yeah. It's really good news.
And how do you feel in yourself at the moment?
I'm exhausted after last week's marathon.
We'll talk about that. We will talk about that. But I do want to quickly go back to last year's marathon, if you don't mind, because I do think we need to highlight that you did raise like £6,100 for the guide dogs, but you actually got to name the guide dog, which was a black Labrador, and that I love.
Yes, we did. Well, actually, it was closer to £7,000 at the end. We had some last-minute donations, so it's closer to £7,000 that we raised.
Congratulations!
Yeah, that was without any gift aid, so it's pretty amazing. So yes, we got to name the guide dog, and I because so many people had contributed to the fund, we put a poll out on Facebook to ask what people wanted, and we gave some choices. So they didn't just come up with names. We had a few shortlisted choices, but everybody voted for Ira, which was my nan's name. My nan was called Ira, and it actually means snow in Welsh. So it's quite bizarre that it's a black Labrador.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So it's really fitting that the dog was named after my nan, because my nan had the same condition as I do, and she went blind. She wasn't as lucky as I was. I say lucky, being visually impaired, but you know what I mean. At least I got some. Yeah. So she went completely blind, and she was an absolute legend. My nan was really amazing lady. So it's really fitting that the dog was named after her.
Oh, so and that was just by coincidence that the name guessed, and then it just turned out to be your nan. It's like such a spooky experience.
Yeah. So we gave a choice of names. So there was like I think there was 4 that we gave a choice of on the poll, and Ira was voted the top name.
So have you had a dog, or is it because you've got some sight that you don't need a guide dog, just a stick?
I would qualify for a dog, but we've got 2 dogs of our own. They're very old. We've got Jack Russell and a Springer Spaniel. So whilst they're still with us, then I couldn't have a guide dog, because our Jack Russell George is a bit of he's a terrier. So,
yes, true. And they want to protect their human mum.
They do. So, but I'm quite fine as I am with just my long cane. I do rely quite heavily on my husband, which is, I probably shouldn't, but I do go out by myself. And up until this year, I was working and I'd travel to London once a week on the train by myself. So,
You are very independent.
Yeah.
I
I think
love
you'll find
it.
most visually impaired people that I know are exactly like me and fiercely independent.
So you've been running a short time, and what I
Yeah.
like about you is that, like myself, you like to fancy dress. You've done the 118, you've done the onesies. You're like my twin runner. I love it. So what got you into the fancy dress side of running? Was it for charity, or do you think,
Yeah.
let's
No,
just
I
have
think
a
I'm just
laugh?
crazy. I think both, really, to be honest. I think both. Let's just have a laugh, and for charity. So it was, I've always been I like fancy leggings. I like to be bright. I like just things that make you happy when you're running. Because, let's face it, sometimes, especially on the long runs, running is, it can be a bit boring. Not
It
that
can.
I'm bored running with my guide runners at all, by any stretch of the imagination, because we chat constantly. But it can be tough. So I like to brighten things up. But it was during lockdown, really, where the fancy dress thing started. And because I had to self-isolate because of all of the COVID restrictions, I was going through chemotherapy when lockdown started. And chemotherapy is really hard. I mean, it is really hard thing to go through. I'm still going through chemo now. But I decided that I didn't want to become inactive during chemotherapy because I'm such an active person. And I decided that on my good days, regardless of whether I was feeling poorly or, I just needed to push myself to do something. And I'm lucky because I've got a treadmill at home.
Okay.
So I started running with people that I run with normally. So some of my guide runners, like there's a chap called Mr. Shep. I call him Mr. Shep. He's Andrew Shepherd. And my other friend, Claire Weaver, who is they're both guide runners of mine. And we started doing these virtual runs. So we'd be connected via WhatsApp and things like that. And then there was the 2.6 challenge.
Yes.
And so I decided that for the 2.6 challenge, I was going to run a marathon on my treadmill between chemo cycles. So that's where the fancy dress really started. And every single, I had a whole raft of people want to run with me virtually. And so every single run I did in a different fancy dress costume. And I ended up running 2 marathons. There was that many people that wanted to help out. I ended up running 2 marathons between chemo cycles. So that's like 14 days, 2 marathons in 14 days on my treadmill. And every single one of them, we were in fancy dress. So myself and the other person doing the run on the other side were in fancy dress. And we had some amazing contributions of costumes, I can tell you.
What was your favourite?
80s, I think. I did an 80s, two 80s runs, one with Anne McCallion, who's another one of my guide runners, and the other one with my friends Claire and Joe. And so they were all bright tutus or shell suits. And of course, I was running inside, so nobody could see me apart from the photos that I put on Facebook. But all of my guide runners were running outside during their permitted outside time. So they got to run outside in these fancy. And my ultimate favourite was the 118 costume, without a doubt.
Yeah, that gets lots of attention. That does.
Yeah,
Definitely,
yeah.
definitely.
There
And
was also like superhero themes. So we did Supergirl and The Incredibles, and yeah, it was really good fun.
oh no, you're a girl of my own heart. I love it. And I hear you, when Parkrun was active, you were a very active volunteer yourself at Arrow Valley. Is that correct?
Yeah, I get just, well, both my husband and I get as much out of volunteering as we do out of running. So my husband hates running. He does run with me, but he hates it. He only does it because I like to go out
Yes,
and
I've got the same
explore.
situation.
So yeah, I think we volunteered somewhere close to 40 times in the 18 months. That's 40. That's not 40 times. We've done multiple jobs on days, but
Yeah,
40
yes.
like separate dates. And we've actually volunteered more than we've run at a park run, simply because we just enjoy it. We love cheering people on. So yeah.
But I heard also that in December last year, you wanted to experience running Tether 3. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So actually, I'm really glad we did that when we did, because it was literally just before I started to become really poorly. So it was the 7th of December last year. And I decided I wanted to do a tether-free park run, because normally when you run with a guide runner, you're tethered together. So you've got I suppose it's like a rope sort of affair,
Yes.
together, and you're in constant contact with your guide runner, and you can feel a lot through a tether. But I wanted to experience what it felt like to run free on my own without being tethered to somebody else. And the only place I felt safe doing that for a distance of any sort was at Ara Valley, because I know the terrain so well, and I know every bump in the path. And so there was a whole team of us got together. I can't remember exactly how many people, but there was a lot of people from my running club, Run Ulster. I'm a member of quite a few running clubs, but Run Ulster is my first running club. So there was Run Ulster, and there was also quite a few people from Ryland Runners, which is my other club that I go to. And we had this, I can only describe it as like a Kipchoge affair going on.
Okay.
So there was a guide runner either side of me, making sure that I didn't go off the path or veer off, because there was plenty of places where you could veer off that path, believe me. And there was people in front and people behind, sort of forming a sort of protective bubble, if you like, around me. And we'd agreed it with my park run that we could do it. And so they made announcements because normally everybody has to run, single file and keep left at our park run, but they explained it to everybody, and we were very respectful of everybody else in the park, because there's lots of people walking our
Yes.
park too. And it was such an amazing experience to run tether free. I can't tell you what it was like. I did cry when I crossed the finish line, because I ran the whole 5K with just Corinne on one side, Claire on the other, and people in front and behind, just making sure people were clearing the path and whatnot. And it was absolutely, I was terrified, I must admit, I was terrified to do it, but it was absolutely amazing. But actually, since I've run that tether free, I've started to do just a little bit more where it's quiet, where I know the ground. I've started to do a little bit more tether free, so that's been really amazing too.
You really are an independent woman, aren't you?
Yeah, yes, I am. I mean, sometimes you have to be, well, most of the time, I have to be tethered to somebody, and you have to have somebody constantly telling you, what the ground's like, where there's difficulties in the paths, or, what the ground's like underneath you. But it is quite an experience to run tether free, it really is.
But you're not just a runner, are you? You're often seen out with your husband, Mark, cycling
Yeah.
on the
Oh gosh,
tandem.
you've really done your homework, haven't you?
I have.
So so my husband's a cyclist. He loves cycling, and he made me promise that if I ran the London Marathon last year, that I would be brave and go back on a bicycle. And I hadn't been on a cycle. Oh my goodness, it's got to have been early 30s, I think, probably was the last time I went on a bike. And I got knocked off. It's before I started to lose the majority of my sight, and I got knocked off my bike. And I've never really been on one since. But I did promise him that if I ran the London Marathon last year, that we would go on a tandem, we'd have a go. So when we completed the marathon, he was immediately on eBay looking for tandems, and he found one, and I said, all right, go on then. And he bought it. And so we did start cycling on our tandem, and I can't tell you, it was terrifying going on the back of that bike. But now I absolutely love it. And it was horrible when I was having IV chemo, because I'm on tablet oral chemo at the moment. But when I was having IV chemo, I couldn't go on the tandem, because I'd got like a permanent catheter in my arm. And I'm not supposed to be running anyway, because I've got tumours in my spine. So they tell me I'm not allowed to be running, and I'm not supposed to be cycling either, but I really don't care. But since I had the catheter removed from my arm, I've been back out on the tandem, and I can't tell you, it's just a wonderful experience to be out there on the bike.
It must be different as well, because obviously your other senses become alive, and being on the bike, you feel the wind more.
Yeah,
That must be an amazing experience.
it's amazing, and I don't particularly like going very fast. Mark will tell you that. That's my husband, Mark, will tell you that. And because it scares me, especially if we're going downhill, because I can't quite tell where. Oh, well, I can't tell where we are. But it's quite weird when you're visually impaired. You are right. Your other senses do come alive, and you can tell if, like, there's hedges, or if you're in a built-up area, you can hear the difference in your surroundings. But that's really magnified when you're on a bike. Believe it or not, you can tell much more where you are and what's around you, and it's just thrilling. It really is.
And you also like open swimming.
Oh goodness, I wouldn't say I like it. I would. I had a go. Yes, I did do it, and I'm very much into, if something scares you, if you are frightened of something, you should perhaps just go ahead and see if you could do it, to see if you can overcome that fear. So I only learnt to, I'm 47 now, and I only learnt to swim when I was 40, because a friend of mine entered me into a swimathon, because she knew that if I hadn't got a goal to work towards, that I would never ever, I'd never do it. So I learned to swim when I was 40, and I had to swim a mile. I had a year to learn to swim, in deep, in the pool with the deep end. And so I did, and we swam a mile for charity, and that was amazing. But I carried on swimming after that because I really did enjoy it. And some friends of ours are open water swimmers, and my friend Becky wanted to get me into the open water, so we did do it. We did it in the summer last year, late summer last year, and I did like it. I can't say that I loved it, but I would do it again. Yeah.
Before we lead on to the virtual marathon that you did on Sunday,
Yeah.
I was interested to find out that, was it last year when you ran the London Marathon that you did a petition for the guides to have a finished
Yes.
medal?
Yeah. So
This
when I
surprised me that you had to do it. That's so.
it really surprised me too. So when we entered the London Marathon, I didn't realise that guide runners at that point weren't recognised as runners in their own right at the marathon. So they're doing exactly the same training as the person they're guiding. They're having to go through all the same experiences that the person they're guiding are, but they were not recognised in their own right. So they wouldn't get a time, they wouldn't get a medal or anything like that. Now I know that guide runners don't do it for those reasons, they don't, but it meant a lot to me that they were recognised in that right. So yes, myself and Simon Elliott, that you have interviewed before, we started a campaign via social media, which very quickly people like the RNIB and some of the running magazines picked up on. And we campaigned really to get the same recognition for guide runners, so that they would be recognised as runners in their own right. They would get a finish time and a medal themselves. Yeah, with a lot of help from social media and the RNIB and other people that were campaigning at the time, we successfully got the rules changed for the London Marathon. So now guide runners are recognised in their own right and receive a medal and a finish time, just the same as all the other runners do.
Wow, I was just, amazed that you had to go through that. I was really shocked when I was told that. Like you said, you expect it, but no, you had
Yeah,
to.
all the other races that we'd ever done, we'd never ever come up against anything like that at all. It was a real shock for the London Marathon, and the first thing I did was write to them to question, was this right? Could they explain why it was? And they said yes. Oh no, the guide runners, they're not there. They're just there to assist. I said, but, and I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that we were being treated differently in today's day and age to anybody else, because everywhere else that we'd ever done races or ran, people were so welcoming, and quite a few races we'd been like probably their first visually impaired runner, that we'd done, and they were always so welcoming, and what could they do to help us. But the London Marathon was a different experience. It's not like that now, I must say, since they changed the rules. But I was really shocked that we had to even ask for guide runners to be recognised.
So leading on to races, have you done many other races then in the short time that you've been running?
No, not really. So before the London Marathon last year, I'd done a couple of 10Ks and one half marathon. That's
Well,
it.
it's still, you know, still 10K and half
Yeah.
marathon.
Oh,
That's good.
and a 20-mile race. I did do a 20-mile race.
Which one
But
was that?
since
Which
that
one
was
was
the
that?
Nottingham 20, but
Okay.
it was the one and only time the race has run. It was a good race, actually, really nice. But yeah, so since the London Marathon, I've done a few more. I did a whole series of 10Ks last summer, which I'm really glad that I did do. Last summer, I was all about trying to get faster, which I'm not now. I'm just glad to be out running, because running is a real effort for me at the moment. And I'm mostly I'm a sort of I'm a Jeffer these days. I like to run walk because I don't have the energy to run like I used to. But I'm just grateful to be out there doing it, to be honest.
So let's talk about Sunday. Now, when you first applied for the London Marathon, you pulled out when you found out that you had cancer. Then
Yeah.
what made you change your mind to then take up the virtual London Marathon?
A couple of things, really. One, my husband said he wanted to do it, which really floored me, because I'd never thought that he would want to do anything like that ever. He's the most he'd ever done was 10K. And secondly, because I knew that the charities have really, really suffered during the coronavirus pandemic. And I thought, well, if I can just raise a bit more money, if I can just help my chosen charity, which this year was the RNIB, then I'm doing something good, and I can feel positive about it. And I must admit, I was really unsure whether I would be able to do it, but I thought, well, if we just broke it down into manageable chunks, because it was virtual and because we had 24 hours to complete it, I thought if we could just break it down into manageable chunks, I think I'll manage. I think I'll be able to do it. And it was really important to me that I got to do it with Claire, who I should have been running the London Marathon with this year as well. And so she agreed also to do it. So I thought, yeah, why not? So I contacted the RNIB to see whether that would be a possibility. And actually, she was just about to ring me to see if I would do it, because I'd already done the 2.6 challenge for them. And so we agreed, yes, we'd give it a go. And there was no pressure on us to raise a particular amount of money, because we'd already raised quite a lot for them this year anyway. So we decided, yes, we'd do it. And once I'd decided that, I've got a Macmillan buddy, Sonia, who I also run with. She's a big runner. And she also then got a team together to run for Macmillan. So we were raising for two charities this year, the RNIB and Macmillan. And it was amazing, actually. We did break it down into 3 sections. We did a night run, which was a night trail train, and the weather, oh my goodness.
I was going to say, how did you cope with the heavy rain?
It was horrific. It was horrific. And also during that run, I had a really bad reaction to my chemotherapy. So I was quite poorly. And so we came home. We did it. We were about a mile short of what we needed to be on the night run. But there was a group of us, all socially distanced, of course, all came out to support, and we did the night run, which was really good fun. Even though I felt so poorly, it was really good fun. And then we came home and we got warm, and I had some medication to stop me feeling poorly. And I thought, I don't know how I'm going to get back out in the morning, but we did. We got back out at 9 o'clock the next morning with another group of us. There was actually my friend Cheryl did the whole marathon with us, as well as Claire and my husband Mark. And we did a walk then in the day between 9. We did about, I think, 13 and a half miles we did between 9 and 12:30, which isn't bad timing. I'm a very fast walker, is all I can say. And my friends kept saying to me, we're never going to get this done in the time that you've allotted. We're never going to. I said, yes, we will. Just walk at my pace. But they were having to jog to keep up with me. But it was good fun. We had some other support on the way. So there was some pit stops from people that came out to, do socially distanced rest stops and things, which was really lovely. And then the very last part of the day, we went to our local Arrow Valley Park, because obviously that's where we would normally do our park run. And the other team that were running for Macmillan finished at the same time as we did. So we all, although we weren't together, we were socially distanced. We were together running, socially distanced, although some of them ended up doing an ultra, because I needed 10K to finish.
Oh, okay. So they did it with you.
Yeah, they finished it with us, and it was amazing. I did cry at the end. But it was amazing. But I didn't realise when we got to Arrow Valley Park that my younger brother Dave, who's a paramedic, had come all the way from Haywards Heath with my two nieces to cheer me on. And
Oh,
my husband, we ran out. They did us a guard of honour. The team from Macmillan did us guard of honour, socially distanced, of course. And we ran out through the guard of honour. And Mark was saying to me, Dave's here. And I was like, Dave, who? And he said, it's your brother. And I was like, oh my goodness. And so then I burst into tears. So I was sobbing for at least a kilometre that my brother was there with the girls. But it was just such an emotional experience. And actually, from this year's London Marathon, from Macmillan and from the RNIB, we've raised nearly £15,000 between us without any gift aid.
Wow,
Yeah,
fantastic. That's
yeah.
amazing. Well done.
Yeah, well done everybody that donated. I'm just
Yeah, exactly.
overwhelmed with people's generosity.
Is that what's
Yeah.
kept you strong at the moment? Getting all this support?
Yes, I think it is, to be honest. Having a goal is one thing, because just after I started my IV chemo, I found out that the cancer had spread and it was incurable. And I can't tell you how horrible that was to hear. Having to make some massive changes to my life, giving up, I've had to give up work and all sorts of things that you should never have to make those choices, really. But what has got me through is the friendship and support that I've had from the running community. I cannot tell you what it has meant to me to have people virtually run alongside me, send me those messages of support. The running community have been phenomenal, to be honest with you, and that really is what has kept me going.
Yeah. So what's next for you, Lizzie? Because obviously I cannot see you. You look like, to me at the moment, while we're doing this podcast, you're either in bed or you're on a sofa with loads of, puffy blankets and cushions.
Well, that's exactly what I'm sat on the bed. I'm feeling quite exhausted at the moment, so I've been having a bit of a restful week this week. So I'm sat on the bed talking to you. But do you know what? There has to be something next, because I need to have a goal
Exactly.
to work towards. So I'm not 100% sure what's it. Maybe an ultra. Maybe I'll do an ultra.
Whoa. Okay. I did not expect that. Okay.
I don't know. I need to do something. So I'm open to suggestions.
Are you, you often hear about people that write the diary and story. Is that something you would consider doing as well? Because you have been running for a short period of time and it is very inspirational. Have you
Oh,
thought about jotting this down and, you know?
I haven't. Some people have suggested it to me, because I bake as well. So during lockdown, I bake I baked a lot of bread and cakes and things like that, and I really enjoy that.
I'll send you my address after this podcast. Yes.
Yeah, I'll send you a nice loaf of bread. So I haven't thought about it, but some people have suggested it to me. But then I think, well, nobody would read it.
You'll be surprised. You'll be surprised.
Yeah, maybe I will. I don't know. There's a local runner here called Doug, and he's such an inspirational man. And he's written 2 books, and I've found them incredibly inspirational. And he's run all over the world, and he's just an amazing chap. And yeah, so maybe I would. Maybe I should.
What are his books? Now that you've given him a shout out, we need to know what his books are.
Can you run with me, grandfather? And I can't remember the other one. I'll have to bear with me. I'll just have to go and look. I'm going to take the computer and look. You'll have to.
I feel bad now. I've got you out of bed.
No. I've got them. They're just on the side, because he gave me some copies. You'll have to edit this bit so we can get them right. So the books from Doug are Can We Run With You, Grandfather, which is his second book, and Running Hot and Cold. Those are his 2 books.
Okay, we'll edit so we get them in.
Yeah, it's a chap called Doug Richards, and he's a really, really inspirational local guy to hear. And he's a really inspirational guy. So if he can do it, maybe I can do it.
There's no maybe. You're a very determined woman. We know that you can.
Thank you. Thanks. I'm back on the bed now. Back on the bed.
So Lizzie, to round this up then, you are a late runner. So if there's
Yeah,
anyone in the same situation as you, or even a youngster that thinks, you know, I want to take up running, what advice would you give them?
get some good trainers. Definitely get some good trainers. Take things one step at a time. Definitely, definitely do something like couch to 5K. And if you can, if you feel comfortable doing that in today's climate, try and run with people, with a group of people. So find a local running club or some support, because it really does help when you know, because everyone goes through these running doubts that, oh, I can't do it anymore, or I just don't feel like it today. And if you've got something to work towards, like going out with a club or maybe a race or some doing some charity running, just have something to work towards. That's the advice I would give, really. And enjoy it. Don't get sort of caught up with thinking about speed or distance. Just enjoy being out in the fresh air.
And if you can, get a wig on or a fancy
Oh
dress
yeah,
outfit. And
definitely get a wig or a fact. I've got a really lovely collection of wigs now. Not just because I lost my hair from chemo, but just because I quite like all the fancy wigs. And people actually sent me some really, really crazy fancy dress costumes to run in. So the craziest one, by far the hottest, was a diver's helmet costume. Yeah,
okay.
it's not like a heavy one, it's a cloth one, but oh my goodness me, I did wear it. I wore it on the treadmill and I did do 5K in it, but goodness me, was that hot. But yeah, if somebody's going to start running, just get some good trainers. Definitely get some good trainers. Get yourself some fancy leggings, man or woman, I don't care. Fancy leggings rule the day, and just enjoy it. Yeah.
And finally, what is your must-have treat after a run?
A glass of milk. A glass of milk.
What are you, a cat?
Yeah, don't ask me. If you'd have asked me pre-cancer, I would have definitely said I would have liked a glass of wine. I know it's really wrong, but I coming from a run, have a glass of water and a little glass of wine. That was my definite treat. But nowadays, I can't really drink very well. It makes me quite poorly. So nowadays, it would be a glass of milk and a piece of flapjack.
I think we'll leave it on that. So thank you, Lizzie, for sharing your running tale.
Thank you. Thank you for asking me.